The entire table was beaming, their wine glasses raised high for my brother Kevin. My father's voice was thick with pride as he toasted to the future Dr. Peterson, celebrating what he believed was Kevin's final year at a prestigious medical school. The clinking of crystal glasses echoed in the fancy, overpriced restaurant. I let them have their moment, the sound a perfect hollow chime signaling the end of their fantasy. They were all so happy, so blissfully unaware. I watched my mother dab a tear from her eye, her smile so wide it looked painful. She caught my eye and gave me a little nod, a gesture that was meant to say, "See? It was all worth it." For a second, a hot flash of rage threatened to boil over, but I pushed it down, turning it into ice in my veins. I waited until the waiter had refilled everyone's water and the celebratory chatter had resumed. Then, slowly and deliberately, I reached into my purse and placed a single, sealed manila envelope on the pristine white tablecloth. I slid it across the table until it stopped perfectly in front of my father's bread plate. The conversations faltered. Every eye turned first to the envelope, then to me. The room, which had been buzzing with joy, fell completely silent. My father stared at it, a confused frown creasing his forehead. "Lily, what's this? Is this a card for your brother?" he asked, his voice still holding the cheerful, booming quality from his toast. I just shook my head slightly. "No," I said, my voice steady and clear. "It's for you and Mom. It's an invoice." They thought I was there to celebrate the son they had poured every last cent of my college fund into. They believed I had finally gotten over their betrayal and accepted my place as the supportive sister to their golden child. What they didn't know was that I was there to collect a debt, not a financial one, but a moral one. The envelope didn't just contain paper, it contained the truth. It was a bomb, and I had just lit the fuse. My father's hand hesitated over the clasp, a flicker of uncertainty finally entering his eyes. He looked from me to my mother, then to a suddenly very nervous Kevin. You might be wondering why I chose his celebration dinner to shatter their world with a single piece of paper. To understand that, you have to understand the lie they had all been living for the past year. A lie that cost me my entire future. A lie I was about to expose to everyone they had ever wanted to impress. To understand the lie, you first have to understand the foundation of my family. It wasn't a family so much as a solar system, and my brother, Kevin, was the sun. Everything and everyone orbited him. My parents, my grandparents, and by extension, me. From the moment he was born, 2 years after me, he was anointed. He was the boy, the one who would carry on the family name, the one who would become a doctor, a reflection of my parents' own unfulfilled ambitions. I was just Lily, the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who was expected to be sensible, to not make waves, and most importantly, to not pull focus from the star of the show. This wasn't a sudden development. It was a slow, steady erosion of my worth, drip by drip, year by year. When I was 10, I won the district-wide science fair. My prize was a small trophy and a $50 gift certificate. My parents put the trophy on a bookshelf in the den, behind a large framed photo of Kevin's soccer team where it gathered dust. That same week, Kevin scored 1 goal in a losing game, and my father talked about it for a month, recounting the innate athletic prowess to anyone who would listen. When I brought home a report card with straight A's, the response was always a perfunctory, "Good job, honey, that's what we expect from you." When Kevin scraped by with a C in algebra, my mother would sigh dramatically and say, "Well, not everyone can be book smart like Lily. Kevin has social intelligence. That's far more important in the real world." They had crafted their narrative and they stuck to it. He was the charming, charismatic prodigy, and I was the reliable, plodding workhorse. He could break curfew, lose his house keys for the 3rd time in a month, and talk his way out of any real consequence with a sheepish grin that melted my mother's resolve. I was once grounded for a week for being 10 minutes late coming home because I had stayed after school to help a teacher clean the chemistry lab. The message was clear and consistent. His potential was a thrilling, limitless resource. My achievements were simply duties fulfilled. He was an investment. I was an asset to be managed. For years, I foolishly tried to be okay with that. I told myself that if I just worked harder, if I was just more perfect, one day they would have to see me too. I had no idea that the thing I worked for the most, the one dream I held for myself, was destined to become just another sacrifice on the altar of Kevin. My dream wasn't as flashy as becoming a doctor, but it was mine, and it burned brightly. I wanted to be an architect. I loved the elegant logic of it, the blend of art and physics required to create something lasting and beautiful from nothing. While Kevin was out at parties honing his social intelligence, I was in my room with graph paper and T-squares, sketching floor plans and building intricate models out of cardboard and glue. I devoured books on structural engineering and urban planning. In high school, I took every drafting and design class available. My portfolio was strong enough to win me a small local scholarship, and more importantly, it secured me an early acceptance letter to my dream university's renowned architecture program. It felt like the first real validation of my life, a future that I was building for myself, brick by brick, entirely separate from my family's suffocating orbit. My parents had started a college fund for me when I was born, the same as they did for Kevin. It was always spoken of as a sacred promise. "You focus on the grades, Lily, and we'll take care of the rest," my father would say, patting me on the head. I took him at his word, but I didn't rely on it completely. From the age of 16, I worked. I was a barista in the cold mornings before school, a cashier at the grocery store on weekends, and an algebra tutor in the evenings. Every dollar I earned, minus what I needed for gas and supplies, went straight into a separate high-yield savings account. I wanted to supplement the main fund to ensure I could graduate with as little debt as possible. I was obsessed with the idea of being truly independent. Kevin, meanwhile, treated money like it was a renewable resource that magically replenished every time he flashed a charming smile at our mother. He got into a decent state university for his pre-med track. Mostly on the strength of a well-worded application essay I was certain our mother had heavily edited. His first 2 years were a blur of fraternity parties, expensive spring break trips to Cancun, and a steady stream of phone calls home asking for money to cover unexpected lab fees or required supplementary textbooks. My parents always obliged, seeing it as simply fueling his journey to the white coat and stethoscope. I saw it as them subsidizing his irresponsibility. The contrast was never sharper than when my 10-year-old sedan broke down, and I had to drain half my personal savings to fix it, while Kevin received a brand new SUV as a graduation gift for merely finishing his sophomore year. They were priming the pump for his glorious future, never once stopping to see if my own was being drained in the process. The conversation happened 2 months before I was supposed to leave for university. They sat me down at the kitchen table, a place usually reserved for major family announcements. My mum had her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. My dad refused to look me in the eye, choosing instead to stare intently at a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. There was a strange, funereal quiet in the house that made my skin crawl. Kevin, conveniently, was nowhere to be found. "Lily," my father started, his voice unnaturally formal and stiff. "We need to talk to you about something important. It's about finances." A cold knot formed in the pit of my stomach. I assumed they were going to give me a lecture about budgeting for school, a lecture I didn't need. "Okay," I said slowly, bracing myself. My mother took over, her voice trembling slightly, a classic tactic she used to signal her own distress and preempt any argument. "Honey, you know how incredibly expensive medical school is. It's a huge undertaking. And Kevin, Well, he's been accepted into a very prestigious program out of state. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him, for this entire family. She paused, looking at me expectantly, as if she thought I would break into applause. I just stared back, my heart starting to pound. I waited for the other shoe to drop. The tuition is significantly higher than we anticipated, my dad cut in, finally meeting my gaze. His was filled with a grim resolve that terrified me. We're a little short, so we need to reallocate some family resources. We need to borrow your college fund. The words just hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Borrow. The word was a lie, and we all knew it. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Borrow it? My tuition is due in August. I've already registered for my classes. What are you talking about? It's just for a little while, my mum said quickly, her voice getting higher and more insistent. Kevin's future as a doctor is a sure thing, Lily. Think of the good he'll do. It's a guaranteed high income. He'll pay it all back as soon as he's established. Architecture, well, it's a lovely hobby, but it's a very competitive field, not very stable. You understand, you've always been the practical one. I felt a surge of hot, incredulous anger. They weren't just taking my money, they were retroactively devaluing my entire life's ambition into a mere hobby. My scholarship only covers a quarter of the tuition, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of panic and fury. My personal savings won't even cover one semester. I worked 3 jobs for that money. You promised me. Don't take that tone, my father said, his voice suddenly hard as steel. Don't be selfish, Lily. This is for your brother. This is for the good of the family. You're smart and responsible. You'll figure something out. We are counting on you to do the right thing here. And that was it. The verdict had been delivered. My future had been liquidated to finance my brother's. I wasn't a daughter with dreams. I was a financial instrument, a line of credit for the golden child. The promise hadn't been broken. I had just finally realized it was never meant for me in the first place. The days that followed that conversation are a blur of hollow-eyed shock. I felt like a ghost in my own house. I had to make the most humiliating phone call of my life to the university admissions office, officially withdrawing my acceptance. The woman on the other end was kind, which somehow made it worse. We're sorry to see you go, Lily. We hope you'll consider us again in the future, she said. Future? My future had been cashed out and handed to my brother. I spent the next week in my room, not really eating, just staring at the beautiful, useless acceptance letter and the stack of architectural books on my desk. They felt like relics from another person's life. When I finally emerged, my parents acted as if I were the one creating a problem. My grief was an inconvenience to their celebration. Are you still moping about that? My mother asked one evening, her voice laced with irritation. You need to move on. Life is full of disappointments, and being dramatic doesn't help. My father just avoided me altogether, his silence a heavy, suffocating blanket of disapproval. They wanted me to pretend to be happy for Kevin, to smile and nod at the lavish med school send-off party they threw in his honor. I refused to go. My absence was my only form of protest, a small, silent scream into the void they had created. Kevin himself was insufferable. He strutted around the house with a newfound arrogance, talking endlessly about the prestige of his program and the life he was about to lead. One afternoon, he found me staring blankly at the community college course catalogue online. He leaned against the doorframe with a smug grin. Hey, don't look so down, he said, as if he were bestowing a great kindness upon me. Community college is fine for some people. Look on the bright side. When I'm a big-shot surgeon, I'll buy you something nice. He laughed, a short barking sound with no real humour in it. There was no gratitude, no apology, no acknowledgement of what his opportunity had cost me. In his eyes, the world had simply righted itself, putting me back in my proper place, beneath him. So that's what I did. I enrolled in community college. I got 2 jobs, one waiting tables at a greasy all-night diner and another doing overnight stock at a big box store. My life became an exhausting, monotonous cycle of cheap coffee, dull lectures on subjects I had no passion for, and feet that ached so badly I could feel it in my bones. Every time I served a happy, laughing family at the diner or stacked another box of useless merchandise in the dead of night, I felt the sharp sting of what had been taken from me. They had not just stolen my money, they had stolen my identity. But as the months wore on, the grief began to harden. It slowly, almost imperceptibly, started to transform. It was calcifying into something else. Something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous, resolve. A year bled into the next. My life was a rigid, disciplined routine. Community college classes from 9 to 2, a quick, solitary meal in my car, waiting tables from 4 until 11, then, on weekends, the soul-crushing overnight shifts at the retail giant. I was perpetually tired, but I was also fiercely independent. I had my own tiny apartment now, a cramped studio above a laundromat that always smelled faintly of bleach and damp clothes. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I hadn't asked my parents for a single dime since the day they stole my future. On the rare occasions we spoke, the conversations were brief and sterile. They'd ask if I was doing okay, I'd say yes. Then they would launch into a 5-minute monologue about how brilliantly Kevin was doing in medical school. "He's at the top of his class in anatomy," my mother would chirp. "His professors say he has the steadiest hands they've ever seen." It was all a performance, and I was their unwilling one-person audience. The truth came out on a random Tuesday, in the most mundane of places, the dairy aisle of a supermarket. I was grabbing a carton of milk on my way home from the diner when I heard my name. Lily Peterson, is that you?" I turned to see Mark, a guy who had been in my graduating class and was one of Kevin's closer friends back in high school. We exchanged the usual awkward pleasantries about what we'd been up to. He was finishing his accounting degree at the State University. "That's great," I said, forcing a smile, genuinely happy for him. "I think I see your mum sometimes at the diner I work at." "Oh yeah, the Early Bird Cafe," he chuckled. "Best hash browns in town. Hey," he said, his expression turning more serious and sympathetic. "I was really sorry to hear about Kevin, by the way. That was super tough news." I froze, my hand still on the cold handle of the refrigerated door. My mind raced. What news? "What do you mean?" I asked, carefully keeping my voice as neutral and steady as possible. Mark looked confused, like he'd misspoken. "You know, about him getting kicked out of med school last year. My cousin Sarah was in the same program. She said that whole academic dishonesty thing was a huge deal on campus. Man, I can't even imagine. Is he doing okay now?" The fluorescent lights of the supermarket suddenly seemed blindingly bright. The low hum of the freezers became a deafening roar in my ears. Last year, academic dishonesty. The words ricocheted inside my skull, shattering the miserable peace I had built for myself. For over 12 months, they had been telling me about his triumphs in classes he wasn't even taking. The money they took from me, the tuition for that prestigious program, where did it actually go? My breath hitched in my chest. Kevin wasn't a struggling future doctor. He was a fraud. He was an expelled cheat. And my entire family had been forcing me to finance a lie. I don't remember paying for the milk. I don't remember walking out of the store. My first clear memory is sitting in my car in the supermarket parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned bone white, the engine silent. The world outside the windows seemed distant and muffled. Last year, academic dishonesty. It wasn't just a lie, it was a conspiracy. A year-long performance with me as the sole, unwilling financial backer. Every proud phone call from my mother, every smug comment from Kevin, every dollar I had earned through sheer exhaustion, it all replayed in my mind, but now with a chilling new clarity. The vague answers when I asked about his professors. The constant need for extra funds for study materials. It all snapped into focus. My shock didn't curdle into tears. There was no grief this time. The part of me that could feel that kind of hurt from them had been cauterized a year ago at the kitchen table. What rose up in its place was a feeling so cold and pure it was almost peaceful. It was rage, yes, but not the hot, messy kind that screams and breaks things. It was a diamond-hard, crystalline fury. They hadn't just taken my money and my dream. They had actively, purposefully made me a fool. They had constructed their fantasy life on my back while I was working myself to the bone, believing I was paying for a future doctor's education. Instead, I had been funding my brother's extended vacation from reality. When I got back to my tiny apartment, I didn't storm over to their house. I didn't make a single, tearful, accusing phone call. What would be the point? They would just lie more. They would deny everything, call Mark a liar, and then skillfully turn it all around on me, accusing me of being jealous and trying to sabotage my brother's success. No, this was not going to be a messy, he said, she said family drama. This was going to be a methodical, airtight takedown. My pain was no longer a weakness. It had become my greatest asset. I sat down at my second-hand laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating my face in the dark room. I began to dig. I started with the university's official website, finding their student code of conduct. The section on academic integrity was long and detailed, with expulsion listed as the primary consequence for cheating on major examinations in the medical school. Then I went deeper, scouring old student forums and local news archives from the previous spring. It took 2 hours, but then I found it. A small article in the digital version of the student newspaper. It detailed a cheating ring that had been exposed in the first-year medical sciences program. 10 students, the article said, had been permanently expelled. It didn't list their names, citing privacy policies, but the timing was perfect. My heart wasn't pounding anymore. It was beating with a slow, steady rhythm. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about evidence. This was about building a case. And I would not rest until I had every single piece of it. The student newspaper article was a start, but it was circumstantial. It was smoke, and I needed the fire. I needed something undeniable, something my parents couldn't wave away as a rumor or a misunderstanding. I needed proof that was as cold and hard as the anger that now fueled me. For that, I knew I couldn't rely on Google. I needed a professional. It took me a week to work up the nerve and another week to scrape together the funds from my waitressing tips. But I took a significant chunk of my savings and hired a private investigator. He was an ex-cop with a tired face and a no-nonsense attitude, which was exactly what I wanted. I sat in his dusty, cluttered office, a world away from the gleaming future my parents envisioned for Kevin, and laid out the facts as I knew them. I gave him Kevin's full name, his former university, and the date range of the cheating scandal. I didn't tell him it was my brother. I just said I was investigating a financial matter involving a case of potential fraud. He just nodded, wrote down the details on a legal pad, and told me his rates. "I'll see what I can find," he said, his voice gravelly. I left his office feeling a strange sense of calm. I had set a powerful, impartial force in motion. 2 weeks later, he called me back in. He slid a thick brown envelope across his desk, the same kind of envelope I would later place on that restaurant dinner table. "Your boy wasn't very clever," the PI said gruffly, without a hint of judgment. It wasn't hard to track. Inside was everything I needed, and so much more. First, there was a certified copy of the expulsion letter from the university's disciplinary board, addressed to my brother at his off-campus apartment. The reason for expulsion was stated in blunt, bureaucratic language: gross violation of the Academic Integrity Code, specifically the unauthorized acquisition and distribution of exam materials. He hadn't just cheated for himself, he had organized it. The second set of documents was even more damning. The PI had managed to get a summary of transactions for the bank account my parents had deposited my life savings into. The money hadn't gone to the university bursar's office. There were no tuition payments listed at all. Instead, there was a $10,000 down payment on a flashy new sports car. There were 12 months of rent payments for a luxury apartment building downtown, far from the student dorms. And then there were the withdrawals, thousands of dollars in cash, charges from expensive restaurants, high-end clothing stores, and a plane ticket to Cabo San Lucas for a trip he took during the time he was supposed to have been studying for midterms. I stared at the papers, my hands perfectly steady. The story they told was sickening. He was living like a king on the ashes of my dream. As I sat there, the vague idea for revenge began to crystallize into a sharp, specific plan. A perfect stage for the truth to make its grand debut. Then, as if on cue, my mother called me that very evening, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Lily, darling, we're planning a little family dinner to celebrate Kevin finishing his final exams. It's at the Grand Manor, his favorite steakhouse. We're so proud. You simply have to be there." A cold smile touched my lips for the first time in over a year. "Of course, Mom," I said, my voice sweet as poison. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." The dinner wasn't for another 3 months. It was scheduled to coincide with the end of the academic year, the one Kevin hadn't been a part of for 18 months. That waiting period could have been agony, but for me, it was a gift. The knowledge of the truth, locked away in that thick envelope in my closet, didn't fester. It liberated me. For the first time in my life, I was completely free from their opinions, because I knew their entire worldview was based on a pathetic, hollow lie. The anger was still there, a cold pilot light in my soul, but it no longer consumed me. Instead, it focused me. I threw myself into my work with an intensity that surprised even myself. The jobs at the diner and the retail store were just for survival, but at my second-hand desk in my tiny apartment, I was building. On a whim, I started a profile on a freelance website, offering drafting and 3D modeling services for small-scale residential projects. My prices were ridiculously low at first, but my work was meticulous and fast. A small job creating a deck plan turned into a glowing 5-star review and a referral for a kitchen remodel. That project led to designing a full garage conversion into a home office. My portfolio grew, my reputation grew. An instructor at my community college, a semi-retired architect named Mr. Gable, saw my work and took me under his wing, giving me invaluable advice and passing small jobs his firm was too big to take on. Within 2 months, I was making more from my freelance design work than from my exhausting waitressing job. I walked into the diner one afternoon, handed my apron to my manager, and gave my 2 weeks' notice. The feeling of leaving that place for the last time, of shedding one of my heavy burdens, was intoxicating. I was still working the overnight retail job to ensure a steady paycheck, but my life was finally beginning to resemble something of my own design. I was saving money again, real money, that was going into an account no one knew about but me. I was finally, slowly, laying the foundation for the future that had been stolen from me. All the while, the phone calls from my mother continued, each one a predictable masterpiece of delusion. "Kevin is just swamped with his clinical rotations," she'd sigh dramatically into the phone. "He's so exhausted, the poor thing, but he's a true hero in the making." I would just listen, making quiet, non-committal sounds. That sounds tough. That's great, Mum." It was like watching a movie when you already know the ending. They had no idea their star student was probably sleeping until noon and maxing out his credit cards, his life funded by my past sweat and tears. They were celebrating a ghost. As the day of the dinner approached, I felt no nerves and no fear. I felt only a profound, chilling sense of peace. I had the truth, I had the proof, and I had a real life that I was building for myself. They had nothing but their lies. The night of the dinner arrived. The Grand Manor was exactly the kind of place my parents loved: dark wood, plush leather seats, and prices that were designed to make you feel important for being able to afford them. It was a temple built for the worship of wealth and status. The whole family was there: my aunt, my uncle, my 2 cousins, all summoned to bear witness to the golden child's imminent glory. Kevin was holding court at the center of the table, looking tan and relaxed in a designer shirt I was certain my savings had paid for. My mother was beaming, touching his arm every few minutes, as if to reassure herself that her perfect creation was real. My father was expansive and loud, ordering the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu and laughing with everyone. I was quiet. I wore a simple but elegant black dress and a new blazer I had bought with the profits from my first major freelance project. It felt like armor. I let the conversation flow around me, a tide of oblivious praise. "Oh, Kevin, we're just so proud of you," my aunt gushed. "A doctor in the family. I can't believe it." Kevin just soaked it all in with a modest, practiced smile. "It was a lot of hard work," he said, looking earnest, and I almost choked on my water. Then came the moment I had replayed in my mind 1,000 times. My father stood up, his wine glass held high. "A toast," he announced, his voice booming through the restaurant, drawing the attention of nearby tables. "To my son, Kevin. He has weathered the storm of medical school and is about to embark on a noble career. He is a testament to what hard work and dedication can achieve. To the future Dr. Peterson." The table erupted in "hear, hear" and applause. This was it. This was the peak of their delusion. I let the sounds die down. I watched my mother dab a tear of pride from her eye. Then, as my father sat down, I reached into my purse, my movements slow and unhurried. I placed the thick manila envelope on the white tablecloth. I slid it across the polished wood until it came to a gentle stop right in front of him. Silence fell instantly. Every eye was on me. "Lily, what's this? A card?" my father asked, his cheerful expression faltering into confusion. "An invoice," I replied, my voice perfectly level, cutting through the quiet. "But also some light reading for the family. Go on, Dad, open it." His hands trembled slightly as he fumbled with the metal clasp. He pulled out the first paper. I didn't need to see it. I had it memorized. "The first document," I announced to the table, my voice carrying clearly, "is a copy of an official expulsion letter from Kevin's university. It's dated almost 18 months ago. The reason cited is gross violation of the Academic Integrity Code. He was expelled for organizing a cheating ring." A collective, sharp gasp went around the table. My aunt's hand flew to her mouth. My mother's face went completely slack with shock. Kevin turned a ghastly shade of white, his smug expression melting away into pure panic. "The next few pages," I continued, my eyes locked on my father's, who was now staring at the papers as if they were venomous snakes, "are bank statements for the account you deposited my college fund into. You'll notice there are no payments to the university bursar. Instead, you'll find the $10,000 down payment for Kevin's sports car, monthly rent for the luxury apartment he's been living in, and the expenses for his vacation to Mexico, all paid for with my future." The silence that followed my words was heavier than anything I had ever experienced. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and warmth out of the room. My father stared at the bank statement, his face a mottled canvas of red and white. My mother just whispered, No, that's not true." She turned her desperate, pleading eyes to Kevin. "Kevin, honey, tell them it's not true. Tell your sister she's lying." But Kevin couldn't speak. He was staring at me, his face a mask of pure terror. All the charm, all the easy arrogance had been violently stripped away, leaving only the pathetic, frightened boy underneath. He opened his mouth, but only a choked, gurgling sob came out. That single sound was his confession. It was all the confirmation anyone at the table needed. My uncle, a man who minutes ago had been clapping Kevin on the back, slowly pushed his chair away from the table as if the tablecloth itself were contaminated. My aunt looked at my mother with an expression of pure pity mixed with horror. Then the denial shattered and the rage came roaring out, directed as always squarely at me. "How could you?" my father hissed, slamming his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. He wasn't looking at the son who had deceived him. He was looking at me. "How could you do this? In public, in front of our family? You wanted to humiliate us. You wanted to destroy your brother." "Destroy him?" I asked, my voice still quiet, which only seemed to make him angrier. "He was already destroyed. He just forgot to inform you. I'm not the one who stole my own sister's future to pay for a sports car. I'm not the one who got expelled for cheating. And I'm not the one who lied to your faces every single day for 18 months. You are a cruel, hateful girl," my mother shrieked, finally finding her voice. Tears were streaming down her face now, but they weren't tears of sadness for my pain. They were tears of pure narcissistic fury at having her perfect family portrait shattered in public. "We gave you everything. We worked so hard for this family and you do this. You tear us apart over some money." "It was never just about the money," I said, standing up from my chair. My movements were calm and measured. I reached into my purse, pulled out a $50 bill, and placed it on the table to cover my meal and drink. A final, clean transaction. It was about the lie. You built your entire world on it, and you used my life as the foundation. But you can't build on a lie. Eventually, the bill comes due. I looked around at the wreckage. My sobbing brother, my furious parents, my horrified relatives. I had no more words for them. I had said everything that needed to be said with that one envelope. My work was done. Without another glance, I turned my back on them all and walked out of the restaurant. The sounds of my mother's hysterics and my father's bellowing followed me for a few steps before they were cut off by the heavy wooden doors swinging shut behind me. I walked out into the cool night air, and for the first time since I was a little girl, I felt completely and utterly free. I went home to my small apartment that night and slept for 10 hours straight, a deep, dreamless sleep. The first thing I did when I woke up was block my parents' and my brother's numbers on my phone. I knew the storm of their panic was coming, but I had no intention of standing in the rain. My peace was too new, too precious to let them shatter it with their frantic calls. And the calls did come, dozens of them, from blocked numbers, from my grandparents who had been fed a twisted version of the story, from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all. I went to my classes. I worked on a new design project. For the first time, my life was quiet. About a week later, they escalated. They showed up at my apartment building, buzzing my intercom relentlessly. I didn't answer. Then, one night, as I was leaving my shift at the retail store, they were there, waiting for me in the half-lit parking lot. They looked awful. My father, who had always stood so tall and proud, was slumped, his face gaunt and grey. My mother's eyes were puffy and red. "Lily, please," my mother began, her voice a desperate whisper as she rushed toward me. "You have to talk to us. You have to help us fix this." "Help you?" I asked, stopping a safe distance away. "I think I'm done helping this family." "It's not about that," my father said, his voice raspy. "Your aunt and uncle aren't speaking to us. Your mother's friends are avoiding her. Kevin is a wreck. He won't leave his room. You made your point, Lily. Now you need to help us put this back together. You can tell people it was just a misunderstanding." I stared at them, and in that moment, under the flickering parking lot lights, I saw them with perfect, painful clarity. There was no remorse for what they did to me. There was no apology for the theft, the lies. The years of my life they had devalued. Their only regret was that they had gotten caught. Their only pain was their own public shame. They didn't want their daughter back. They wanted a public relations manager. They wanted me to lie for them, to smooth things over and make their lives comfortable again. No, I said. The word was flat and final. There is no putting this back together. What happened at that restaurant wasn't the end of a family, it was the end of a long and exhausting lie. You have to live with the truth now, all of you. I turned and walked to my car, and this time they didn't follow. A few days later, my aunt called. After a long, awkward apology for having been so blind for so many years, she told me my parents had forced Kevin to sell his precious sports car to cover some of his credit card debt, and that he was now looking for a minimum wage job. The golden child had finally fallen to earth. That same week, I landed my biggest client yet, a contract to design a small guest house from the ground up. The next day, I walked into the big box store for the last time and quit my overnight stocking job. I was finally just an architectural designer. I was finally just me.